I think we are about to go live. It'll tell us, I hope.
Okay.
Okay.
Buenas tardes. Hello,
Yeah.
everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
I'm Jessica Tlazotiani Ochoa Samaripa.
Manuel Samaripa, yeah. We're coming to you from the Institute of Chicanx Psychology. As some of you all know who follow us, and those who don't, we're a community-based entity. We try to have offerings of pláticas and community workshops on issues of wellness and well-being in our community from a Chicanx psychology perspective. We do trainings for mental health professionals as well. Anything else?
And we try to live from our strengths and heal together as a collective people that we are. So we thought we would have these little short Friday conversations. Just being alive, sharing this walk on our Madre Tierra and seeing where we were at. So today we thought we would talk about, living through crisis or being in crisis. And especially in today's day and age where all these different things are happening, we're getting so many different messages. So we maybe thought we'd talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
It depends on who you are. Every single person who is listening, every single one of our hearts has a different show of the way crisis might look in our lives. We may not even use the word crisis or consider it crisis. In fact, I would argue that a lot of the time, by the time our people reach out, that we've already been in crisis for a while sometimes. So
Sure.
if you consider, always we're looking at our strengths, right? But and also not ignoring our challenges. So I think that's why we picked this topic, because when we have these platicas and workshops, people are in different places, they're struggling in different ways. And always the reminder that we're not alone, right? That we're in this together. But also to understand that, we have lived as a people through a lot of different things, and there are many things affecting us that are invisible that we may not even recognize, like systemic racism, interactions with people outside of our homes that may be invalidating our own lived experience, traumatized relationships, stressed relationships within our own families, our own relationships, our dualidades, our partnerships, and concerns with our children. So we are under a lot of the time, and we wanted to maybe talk about some things that could be helpful in these times.
Yeah, because we always talk about these issues that come up for us as a community, not just from the perspective of the Institute and the work we do, but also personally. And I think that's really the key for some of the ideas and the talks that we have, is that it's not an abstract. It affects, if it's affecting us, we know it's affecting others.
Right.
And so
daily life stuff.
Yeah, daily life stuff. And one of the things that we do all the time in the Institute is that, like you said earlier, we come from a strength-based perspective.
Always.
Like, we know the hits that we take, the hits that all of us take out there, and we know we have to tend to those hits. We have to tend to those wounds. But at the same time, one of the ways we tend to them is to reconnect and remember the strengths that we have in our community.
We're a collective people, we always say that, and it's hard to be so separated, and even without the COVID, right? A lot of the times we're just separated by the Western way of living in this country, and we just feel like we're just way too busy and not living our lives in a way that's congruent with our natural world.
Yeah.
I would say, though, that we don't have to, not correcting, but it made me think that we don't have to tend to the hits, right? Sometimes we don't feed them, we don't give them energy.
Oh, yeah.
But we tend to our wellness, the response to the hits, right?
Right.
To the challenges that we take.
Yeah.
More in like decolonizing our thinking and not having, so again, like one of our elders says, she always says, you have to take off your Western lenses and put on our native lenses to see where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something helpful in dealing with the challenges or the crisis that we may be in. Crisis feels like a strong word, but I don't think that it is. I think if you're brown people native to this continent, if you're Chicanx, if you are native, Anahuac, however you identify, Mexican American, Mexican,
Mm-hmm.
that if you're raising a family in this setting, and that includes everything, that includes economic, capitalist, all the different systems that affect our wellness, food supply, healthy food supply. I think one of the strengths is that we can position ourselves, that we can remember that we're part of everything that exists, everything living. There is a natural order in the universe. There is a natural order in the cycles of nature that we live in. What makes us think, that we would be different? There can be that ordered, living that isn't a bad thing,
Right.
So I think positioning ourselves is important. Like when we do danza mexica, everybody, there's a sacred geometry to everything, right? The way we are in a circle, the way we're following the person doing danza in the middle, we're doing it together as one. And that's a strong form of prayer. So positioning ourselves where we're at in our crisis too, anchoring ourselves to all of our relations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are our strengths? Who are our supports? Maybe we don't have any, and there can lie the crisis in and of itself. Maybe we're on our own. And I've been in that position where, many heavy things are just there, and I'm the leader of our family, as are you, and nobody's showing up. It's just you and you. So positioning yourself, with everything that exists and drawing from your strengths, right? What do we have available to us? Without, being able to go to therapy at times, which is a good thing if you're with somebody who knows how to do it in a way that validates who you are, who we are as a people.
Right.
But if you don't have access to those things, what can you do?
Mm-hmm. And I think I want to, like, when you were saying some of the things that you were talking about, and you said that sometimes using crisis can be like a heavy word, but it's really not. And I think it's not. I think it's not overly heavy. But I think what happens, with us and other people in society is that people respond in a way that doesn't understand our current and our past communities' experiences. So we're not saying like, oh, we're in crisis all the time as a way of lamenting like everything's a crisis, and then people say like, oh, everything's a crisis, and why does it have to be a crisis? You're just focusing on the weakness, and you're catastrophizing, and no, that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that. I mean, because what people forget is there are already multiple levels of hits and distress and stress that our people are absorbing every day and over the last 500 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're way past, that kind of lamenting and everything's a crisis and
being
whining.
Weak.
We are set as a community, as brown people on our land, up against systems and institutions that still, as much as we do talk about certain progress and pushing for an ideal, and we need that hope, of course, we need that hope.
Absolutely.
But sometimes the individual people that are our allies and the individual supports that we have is not enough. It hasn't been enough to shift the systems of the institutions. And so basically, we're still living in communities where our needs are not responded to adequately. They're just not. And so when we say we feel like we're living in times of crisis, um, that just highlights already the multiple levels and layers in which our people, as in general, have not been responded to in society.
Right. And then when you again, this is not to just, oh, look how bad it is, but also not to invalidate what we're truly living through, you know. It's easy to let it be invisible and
No.
you're fine. Oh, they're fine. Everybody's fine. And you know what? We do come with a lot of strengths. It would be great if we could use more of our energy towards rising up and flourishing and helping our children and our families to flourish instead of,
Mm-hmm.
hustling, get that money, get access to that healthy food, that water, pay these bills, let
Right.
me try and raise my kids, help them do their trauma because, of course, living under these invisible systems or within them, there's trauma. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of having to deal with the 7 generations back and 7 generations forward of things that we're trying to cope with, it'd be great if we could use our energy towards our flourishing. So I think that's why we wanted to talk about, crisis, because it's important to say that when we talk about things that we're going through, yeah, we're not whining, we're not weak, we're not, get at us, get at us, get at X, facing what we have. We have time and time again proven that we're a strong people. I mean, we saw our
Right.
people out there still, harvesting the food to get to our tables right there in front of those fires in California and
Mm-hmm.
during the COVID and without adequate access to food, water, healthcare, wellness. And we have always been a people that hustles and gets done what we need to get done for our survival. I mean, look at us, we're still here, right? And we're
Right.
strong.
Right.
However, we don't need to ignore what we're going through. And that's why we wanted to have these conversations on Fridays to come together and, talk about our stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of just going a little bit back, because what you were saying is that we're always out there. You were talking about the farm workers out there in California, and here where we are in Austin, we we know that 76% of the hospitalizations are brown people in terms of COVID, right? That came out a few months ago. That's huge.
That
That's
is huge.
huge. And so we can't just look to also like people again, like, oh, those brown people, they're, those Mexicanos that, that they're not paying attention to safety. Well, the majority of them have had to work, have had to be out there, they didn't have a lot of options. And so what that number shows me is it shows me who's really doing the work in our cities, right?
2 of our own kids are essential workers, you
Yeah.
know. And we have an elder in our home too who has a lung disease, and so those essential our kids come home from work and we could lose a family member.
Yeah.
And it's weird to live in a city. We live in Austin where it's so white centered of a society here, and that liberal progressive thing only acts as a mask, really, to mask all the harms that are happening to many different people, communities of color here.
Yeah.
So it's weird because I'll be at the part of these homeschooler, unschooler, groups, and then I have these other groups where it's my people, and they're like, my tia has COVID, pray, and my grandmother just got COVID, and then over here people are going, hey, who wants to come out for all ages, soccer, and it's like the two worlds never meet. So in a way, when we're talking about crisis, even those interactions of seeing that our people are not, our lives are not put a value on, I know that could be considered a broad leap, but really we've seen time and time again in this city that a large portion of the community just doesn't care and doesn't want to care for the vulnerable communities. So in those ways, those little hits can be challenges to work through. And then when you try and approach the wellness of your family after experiencing all these external hits outside of your house, it can be challenging. So what strengths do we draw on?
Right. And I think that's what, that's the pieces that we want to to leave with each other, continue to kind of have those discussions, because sometimes those strengths aren't readily available. I mean, if we knew some are, but some aren't, and if we knew all of them and we could access them and they seem like real options for us all the time, then that's what we would do, right? We would be able to do that. And so I think when we're under so much, a lot of the times, it takes a little bit of time, reflection, reaching out to people that you feel safe with, so that those strengths can reveal themselves. It could be something that you remember from your childhood, something that a tia or abuela did when they were when the family was having a hard time. Some little piece that you maybe forgotten along the way or you forgot about. It could be something like that. It could just be reconnecting with your own sense of hope and wonderment before we reached a certain point where we had so many hits, right? And so we need time to reflect on that. And I think that's the struggle. Sometimes we don't have all of that time.
And then we talked about positioning ourselves, right? Where are we, in terms of like cosmologically, we used to use that, our ancestors did, position ourselves with the stars, position ourselves in the natural order. Every season has a flavor of food that you would typically eat, and just going with that order. And for example, in the wintertime, it's a time, to reflect, shut down, a time of the north to shut down all activities and just go inward, right? So to work within these natural systems that we're a part of, that is something that we can learn to do now, that we can access within ourselves, to reconnect with our ancestors, to walk outside, spend some time with our Madre Tierra, walking on our Madre, with her, gardening. And before anything else, everybody always says the basis of wellness, before you're going to handle any crisis, before you can get up and use your strengths that you have, the basics: sleep, eat, and eat healthily, sleep, and what was the other one? Joaquin's distracting me.
Yeah. It was nutrition.
Nutrition, sleep.
Sleep.
You gotta be kidding me. Water.
Well, no.
Somebody message what the third one is. There's 3 basic things you need to do before you can handle any other crisis. Let me get Joaquin. I'll be right back.
Sure. So one of the things that also that we wanted to talk about, and Tlaciani will kind of talk a little bit more, is, it's similar to what we've been saying, which is how does our community come together and handle living in these times of crisis? Well, one piece is that these are situations that we are used to. It's not a great thing, but as we were saying, we are used to living in crisis. We're used to. I remember it reminds me of an interview that I heard with Juno Diaz, an author, and he said he was toying with the idea of writing a zombie apocalypse story in his home country, and then he thought, because zombies are the big deal, right, over the last few years. And then it occurred to him, so I said, well, wait a minute. This whole apocalypse mentality and struggling for survival and not knowing what's going to happen next, and even people dying where he's from, that's actually what my people live through every day. So a zombie apocalypse is like just another day, right? And so,
Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah.
I don't think we realize sometimes when we're saying, why are we stressed out or why are we anxious? The things that are happening, again, we're part of everything that exists, everything that is alive, everything that lives. So the election happening, the way the government is running, the harm that it's doing to our people, the pain of just having the detention centers there, refugees, so much suffering, and also the nomination of another, racist Supreme Court justice. All these things, you hear about them, and people say, don't listen to the news, because it affects us. It affects us within our bodies, and we have a shared trauma that we may not know why we don't feel well. And our children too, they're aware, they are connected to everything, so they get anxiety, they have stress, and all kinds of things that affect them, and we may not realize because so many things are. We talk about making the invisible visible a lot, and so many of these invisible things that are going on affect us internally, our spirits, our bodies, and we have to come away. Sometimes we just need, want to hide or connect with each other, whatever way helps.
Yeah.
But we are dealing with these things that we need to understand that whatever struggles we're going through, they're happening. We need to give our lived experience validity. We need to trust our own voices. We need to recognize that if this is happening to me, if I speak this and nobody else, I don't have any support about it, or else I get negative messages back, you trust yourself, you trust what you're going through, and you work towards your own healing, even if it's just you and you.
That reminds me of the concept that Puerto Rican psychologist Lillian Comas Diaz talks about, which is post-colonization stress. Right? So we hear a lot about, post-traumatic stress disorder, which it's an elevation of that, right? And so she talks about a lot of our people having to deal with post-colonization stress, which is any types of impositions that have been given, that we've experienced through the conquest, from the conquest till now. Anytime our languages have been eradicated or tried to be eradicated, anytime we've been driven from our land, we've been taken from our lands, and the most recent example we see that, like, people say that's over, that's in the past, that's hundreds of years ago. Well, one of the ways we see that even right now is gentrification, right? We're still getting kicked out of our land. We're still getting pushed out of our land. And so this idea of post-colonization stress is something that I think, seems to be more reflective than just post-traumatic stress, right?
And more inclusive too of the community, of what we're, again, that's bringing the invisible visible.
Right.
And I think focusing on our strengths, focusing on what we can do. Sometimes when we're feeling really in crisis, really stressed, we can just do one moment to the next.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's all you can do to bring yourself to the present moment and say, let me count 5 blue things, just to bring myself here, and maybe stop a panic attack, or just take deep breaths. But once we take one step at a time, and we remember that we're not walking alone, that we're walking with our ancestors, that even if it's a small thing towards our wellness, like, hey, maybe all we have access to is, burger and fries or some tacos from Taco Cabana, okay, we'll have that, but maybe you just at home grab a handful of lettuce or some spinach and eat that too. So it's these small little steps. Sometimes it's not big moves that get us through things. And many times in my life, it's just been little thing by little thing by little thing that gets me through. And then before I know it, I'm in a place where I can handle a little bit more than I thought I could.
Right. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because when we're trying to shift patterns that we've been, they've been a part of our lives just individually, that we know, like, okay, we have to change certain patterns to kind of be healthier. We don't want to set it up where, and it's not to negate, trying to motivate ourselves to really go for something big and huge. Of course, that's a good thing. But it's more in the sense of, navigating our lives all the time. We can shift slowly how we add things. So we don't immediately completely shift our diets and stop eating everything we're eating and start eating other things, because really, even physically, we're not accustomed to certain tastes. Our bodies are going to crave that. We know that our bodies are going to crave what we were eating before, but we start adding certain things that we didn't add before. We start kind of transitioning so that we can move towards something. We don't have to just arrive from one day to the next. We can move towards something. Um, that reminds me of um, something that we've heard before, and one of our hermanos talks about a lot, is that for a lot of Native people, our people, they weren't as focused on, because we have big debates on what is the truth, right? What is the truth about something? They were more focused on what is the way, right? What is the way, the best way to live our life as human beings? What's the best way? What's the best path to move forward? So I think that, is an important piece.
Right.
Is what is the best way for ourselves and our community and our
Right.
people to move
That
forward?
that's really good because that's not a destination as we hear often, but
Right.
it gives you time to reflect and think about where you want to be. Again, where you want to position yourself in a situation.
That's
I'll
true.
do that right now. So I did want to talk about, say again, about validating our voices, making sure that we can trust ourselves and trust what we see is happening, and make sure that we have healthy relationships, and especially right now when people are possibly isolated, at home, there may be some unhealthy relationships that are causing us damage, or our children damage, and believing, that whatever we can do in that moment may be enough just to get us to the next step. Again, if you have nobody that you can talk with that validates what you may be going through, write it down. Often Manuel talks about narrative therapy, and of course we come from a people who have used an oral tradition. Write down your story, read it back to yourself, come away with it, come back. Maybe you'll notice something new the next time you look at it. And maybe you can expand that. Maybe something became important that you hadn't seen earlier. Write more about it, add to it, change it. And that can be a way, sometimes we can't afford therapy or we can't afford other things that we might need to be able to reach out. But that's something that we can do. Maybe also another piece to that would be if we could have our own medicine gardens, and maybe have a nice calming lemon balm or something that would relax us, manzanilla, and just have some tea and sit with your story and read it and let yourself believe it. Because a lot of the times as we know, we're our own enemy. We have to look in that obsidian mirror and deal with ourselves, The hardest thing is when we look in the mirror and realize we're the ones causing damage. We're the ones causing harm to our friendships, to our relationships, even with our children. That would be the hardest thing to see. But maybe as we look at the stories, when we're writing our story, we notice, hey, you know what? That was me. I'm seeing that the lens with which I'm seeing the world is damaged. It's traumatized, and I may be causing some harm here, So that is one self-reflective piece, would be writing our story and giving validation to whatever it is that we're experiencing.
Okay. I mean, I think stories are powerful. Our language, our voice is powerful. And the reality is that we don't get our voices validated in the society.
No, that's true.
Very often. We really don't. So, speaking your voice in any way, in any format, is something that I don't even think we realize is something that we need to flex more often, in whatever way feels comfortable.
Right.
But yeah.
Often when we come together in a circle, with a kalpuli, which is Nahuatl for community, when we come together, man, we start talking around the circle and everybody has so much on their heart that they want to share. And that can go on for hours, right? Because we don't have a lot of time to come together and to share our stories and have what we're experiencing or what we're living through as we're walking on our madre together. We don't get a chance to have our life stories validated like that.
Right.
So it's really important. Or when we're in the Mascal, the Sweat Lodge, people really pour out when we come together to heal, because we're walking out there again with all these invisible systems that are affecting our wellness, affecting our families, and we don't get to really believe ourselves. I often say that when I'm decolonizing my own mind and working through my own trauma, I tell Manuel all the time, I'm like, why don't I believe myself that
At this point already.
that I'm going through these things?
Yeah, that's
the
right.
evidence is clear.
Yeah.
But I just have this. I've been programmed to not believe that I'm experiencing these things that I'm moving through.
Right.
So it can be hard to match your strengths to your challenges if you're taught to believe that it's a weakness to
Yeah.
even notice that you're going through something, that it's a weakness, that you're whining or complaining if you speak what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you need to find the people that will be a safe place, and that their traumatized lens doesn't end up judging and hurting you while you're trying to heal. So it's tricky being a collective people. The relationships can be stressed, and it's hard when those relationships that you turn to can just make you feel less validated. So it's important that you find the right spaces, the right people that can help you and be of service. Even if it is being that obsidian mirror that tells you, hey, you know what, you're messing up. You're causing some damage here. It can be that as well. So it's not for the faint of heart.
No. But I think yeah. I mean, I think that's a good place to kind of pause and end for today.
So we thought, speaking of that last thing that we just talked about, like safe spaces and our relationships, we thought we would maybe talk next time about collectivism and individualism, right? Where they intersect, that it is a spectrum, that we may have, as you always say in a lot of our workshops, that we may have more individualistic behavior in certain ways and more collectivistic behavior in other ways, and maybe talk about where it would be good to set up healthy boundaries and for our individual selves, and then other areas where we can share and be open more, and share our lives in a more collective way. So maybe we would have that conversation next.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a good one. So kind of just keep a lookout for our next Friday chat, and hope to see y'all there. I know some people had comments and questions. Well, this is the first time we've set this up in this way, so hopefully we can respond to your stuff probably after we close up.
And if you are experiencing any kind of crisis, please reach out. There's NAMI is always a good place to start, right?
Yeah, NAMI
is
a good place.
Because they have free...
they have free workshops and stuff.
Yeah. For family support and for individual support. And
right.
And then there's also hotlines if you need to reach out. But more, this is just a conversation about how we are moving through the world, along with our family on this continent.
So be well, be safe this weekend, and we'll continue the conversation.
Lean into that joy. Oh, Mateo.
Let's see.
Do we just end?
Wait. If you end this live video, you'll be able to choose if you want to save or delete it. Okay.